Hi everyone, it's Patricia Warby here, Alchemy Therapies and my emotional audit. And today I want to talk more about a very uncomfortable subject, which is shame. Now, a few weeks ago, I recorded the first in what I consider a series of commentaries on the work of Matt Liccata, who has talked extensively about shame. Now, if you ask most people about shame, they'll say, no, I'm not ashamed of anything. That's the reasoning I had. What I didn't realize was that shame has nothing to do with that. It's actually feelings of unworthiness that are buried inside your body from experiences usually of your early childhood, where maybe your attachment needs weren't met in some way. And that could be not the fault of your parents, but external circumstances. If you had a difficult traumatic birth, or you were separated from your mother for any reason, or she was suffering from postnatal depression, or you had bullying experiences at school that kind of made you feel different from other people. Perhaps you were a highly sensitive person like me, and so you just felt an outsider or an outcast. There are so many reasons why shame can embed itself, and really I want to talk about it because I think it's the last bastion of healing. You have to get to grips with your shame and understand how it influences you in life. So I wanted to just continue on my dissection of his work, which is beautiful and very poetic, but it's also a little bit impenetrable for some people. So I'm going to sort of take some of the poetry and translate it into everyday language. And I actually ended with the first paragraph, and I'm sort of continue with that today into the second. So he says, at some point, it is only a turning of the heart which will heal the cosmic exhaustion, wounds, and pain of an unlived life, where love is revealed to be the ultimate medicine that can penetrate the deepest layers of our conditioning and felt sense of separation. Now, the thing with Matt's work is that it's so full of information. Every sentence has to be kind of picked apart, so you can't just like skim read it. It's a turning of the heart. Okay, so what happens in life, as many other people have said, some of the great thinkers of our time, I'm thinking probably David Brooks, who I've got into very recently, has talked about this. Your first mountain, where you're externally focused, you're head based, and your second mountain, which occurs to you later in life as maybe you fall off the first mountain, something that doesn't work in your life, and you're forced very uncomfortably to face the truth that your strategies weren't really healing you, weren't really making you feel like you were part of something. And so I say that the healing journey is often forced upon us by illness or financial collapse or the collapse of a relationship. All of those happen to me, actually, and pretty much all together. So you fall off your mountain and you have to come into your heart. You have to find out what you've been doing that isn't working. And often it's the overthinking, strategizing, forcing yourself to fit roles that actually don't feel that comfortable with you. And healing the cosmic exhaustion. Well, I love that. It's not just your personal exhaustion. I got chronic fatigue syndrome, which is the ultimate exhaustion, really. But it's a deeper, bigger impact because we're linked to everything that is. And the wounds and the pain of an unlived life, what you're here to be and do hasn't happened yet. So it's deeply painful to feel in your deepest part of yourself that who you are is not who you're being in that moment. And coming into love, I know it sounds like a cliche, it sounds like a song lyric or something, but coming into love of yourself initially, finding the wounds within and using love to add a balm to that and say, I'm worthy, I am worthy, I am worthy. And it was the biggest leap for me to realize I didn't feel worthy at all, despite my high achieving coping strategy, my first mountain, I was going to conquer that mountain. And then I fell spectacularly. So love is really where this begins. And you cannot look for that externally. It's definitely a heart-based discovery. It's a journey inward. It is the ultimate medicine, because when you learn that love is there for you always, dis-ease cannot exist. It's able to penetrate the deepest layers of your conditioning. Your conditioning are your learned responses. All right, when this happens, I do this. You know, when someone criticizes me, I collapse, or I attack, or I dismiss them and walk away. And the felt sense of separation, you know, we come through life, we're taught actually from our very earliest years that we are individuals, we're striving against other individuals, we're very competitive. Our ego tells us that if we stop for a moment, we will die, you know, we won't cope, we won't be good enough. And so we're each in our little silos of us, in our little, you know, ideas of ourselves as individual animals, if you like. We're not part of anything. We don't have any connection to nature. We're not part of the cosmic order. That's not taught in school. You know, the mathematics, the patterns, the joyous connection that we have to everything that lives is gone. It's not in our culture anymore. And it's a huge wound that is resulting in skyrocketing rates of anxiety and depression and despair and self-harm. And, you know, we're not separate. We belong. We do belong, but we have to find and make that ultimate journey into connection. And he goes on to say, in response to an early environment lacking in empathic attunement, where no mirroring is available, where our embodied experience is not able to be held and validated, we have no choice other than to internalize this and locate the blame within ourselves. Okay, so early environments have been shown to be the most important. What happens to you in the first weeks, months, and years of your life, maybe up to about age 7, before your cortex comes online, that's really the most imprinting time. How people are around you in those first 7 years is so modeling. It's like you're a clay that's being modeled by those experiences. If in that environment there is no empathic attunement, what do we mean by that? Someone that gets you, someone that when they look at you, you can feel the love, you have a heart-based connection, and they kind of understand you without you having to say much, you know, and they love you anyway, even when you make mistakes, even when you fall over, either physically or psychologically. Attunement is a mutual dance. It's like somebody's there for you. They've got your back, whether it's your mom or your dad or your siblings or a good teacher around you. For me, it was a nursery teacher who kind of saw me. She saw me the first time in my life. My creativity, my extraordinary capacity for imagination was witnessed because she was the same. She was another highly sensitive person who used to love playing the piano. I don't remember her playing the piano, but I was told by my mum. I used to gaze at her as she was playing, because for me, it was like a wonder, you know. When no mirroring is available, right? Mirroring is this amazing thing where someone else's brain is in step with yours, and so their kind of facial expressions and their body language shows you that they are happy with you, that they love you, and that you belong. And if they have a flat face or an angry face or a dismissive, you know, body language, the child has these kind of mirror neurons that pick up that signal, and they have to make sense of that. And if our sense of ourself as a human is not able to be held and validated, like, you know, you don't feel like someone has your best interests here or understands you, you have no choice other to internalize that as something wrong with you and locate the blame within yourself, right? I am wrong. I am bad. I don't belong. There's something messed up about me. I just don't never get it right, you know. And so that is the origin of shame, okay? That's how it starts. And it embeds itself as a fundamental belief about yourself that it doesn't matter how much thinking you do and how much achieving you do and how much striving in the material world that you do. You know, I've got a long list of achievements, if you like, you know, written loads of books, I've got degrees, da, da, da. It's nothing if you still feel like I'm worthless. And in fact, it can drive all of that overachieving, which becomes very exhausting after a while, which it did for me. So that's really important to understand. And so the message you say to yourself is, oh, I get it, I'm not being met. And I know why, because I am unworthy of such meeting. I'm flawed in some fundamental way. There really is something very basic wrong with me. Ah, I understand now. And as painful as this is, it's just too unsafe to see any sort of limitation in our caregivers, all right? So the issue here is that if you blame them, if you're able to kind of go, oh, they're just unable to love me and they're, you know, they're distracted or they're in pain themselves or whatever, your little nervous system cannot work with that. All right, it can't because basically you need to attach to survive. So he goes on to say, locating the fault within, that wretchedness and unworthiness serves a function to protect us from a flood of anxiety that our caretakers are flawed and imperfect. And for many of us, terribly unsafe and dangerous. All right, some caregivers are, some parents, some people in your life are actually dangerous. You know, they don't have, not only do they not have your best interests at heart, but they're actively seeking to cause you harm. And so that is an impossible task for a child because you need to attach to survive. Human children are peculiarly unable to survive in the early years without caregiving compared to other mammals. We are very immature for reasons of having our big brains, actually. In order to come into the world through the birth canal, our brains have to be very immature and they develop outside. And so that's why the environment is so key. Okay, so yeah, it serves to protect us. So shame serves to protect the flood of anxiety that we would be given if we saw that our caretakers were unable to look after us or unable to provide us with what we needed. And so it's a strategy, all right? Shame is a strategy that you embody in order to protect yourself from feeling totally anxious. But at some point, that starts to unravel, usually in your teens, sometimes early 20s, in my case, early 30s. All right, and so it usually comes after you've striven and you've tried and you've really exhausted all your strategies. And he goes on to say, as with all effective avoidant or defensive strategies, there comes a time when we no longer require such protection, and to continue to employ that organization keeps us out of aliveness, creativity, intimacy, connection, and true joy. And so when you block out the negative, you know, you also block out the positive, you also shut off joy and connection. And so I believe that's why a lot of people get very disconnected and despairing because they don't have any access to their truth. Underneath so many forms of suffering is a pervasive sense of shame, a deeply rooted sense that there is something wrong with us at the most basic level. And he goes on to say, often when I speak with someone who is struggling, there is an undercurrent of primordial shame, which we can feel together, coloring their perception, emotional experience, and relationships with others. Now, primordial shame, it's an interesting term, you know, it suggests it's there already, that it came with us. It may do, because one thing I haven't said is that it can embed itself from the experiences of our parents or our grandparents. We now know through epigenetics that experiences they had that stress their nervous systems changes our gene expression. And we never need to have had that experience to still have a sense of it as we grow. And so I think that's what he's talking about there. And it does, it colors your perception and your relationships. It's going to really affect your relationships. Okay, a lot of the people I work with really struggle to feel trust in relationships because there's no trust in themselves. You know, there's a bottomless pit where there should be a solid foundation. And if your foundation is built on sand, everything you build is going to be a little shaky. Okay, mine shook itself down when I was 34. All right, and my first relationship fell apart, and I didn't know who I was to survive after that. I just felt like it was all my fault, and if only I'd done X, Y, Z, something would have been saved, and I would have been okay, you know. And I had a lot pinning on that relationship, you know. It was my chance in the world to show the world, you know, it was my home and my status, and you know, I had made a life for myself, and then when it all fell down, who was I? I didn't know. I didn't know. So it affects everything. Okay. Ordinarily, shame looms outside conscious awareness. Okay. It's not something you're going to wake up and know. Right. It wasn't until I really started to do some of this inner work, and I was forced to do that, folks. I did not want to do this work at all. I just wanted to carry on as normal, you know. But when it comes in, it comes flooding into consciousness, accompanied by feelings of hopelessness. All right. And so that's when I went really downhill, and I was told you have depression. All right. And I had never imagined I would get depressed in my life. I had no idea about that. I thought that only happened to weak people, you know, unfortunate people, let's say, like my auntie who'd gone a bit mad, as we called it then, and she'd been sent to a mental institution. You know, it's an awful thing, and it was sort of considered shameful to even talk about her, as if she personally had failed, and it was somehow shaming of the family that she was in our family. That poor woman. It was just treated so badly in the past. I mean, it's a lot better dealt with now, but we still don't have the tools. All right, antidepressants are not healing. They are merely masking the symptom, like most of modern medicine. Right? They don't deal with the inner soulful reason why you're feeling the way you're feeling. And so I'm just going to finish this bit. Despite our attempts to link the despair to some current aspect of our life situation, we're often unable to do so, as it's kind of free floating and erupting under the surface of things. All right. So I could say, well, my relationship broke down, you know, I'm miserable because of that, and I've had to move, and I've lost my animals, and I've lost my home, and I've nearly lost my business. But it was more than that. It was just like, oh, it's just me, you know, I'm just rubbish, I can't do life. That's how it felt. It was kind of a pervasive sense of wrongness. And so it's really difficult to fight that, all right, when you just feel whatever you do, nothing is enough. So to uncover and to begin to illuminate, integrate, and metabolize shame in a way that is skillful, at times we must first confront and work through a variety of other beliefs, emotions, and somatic material. For shame is often hidden and disguised. So shame is an interesting feeling because it doesn't announce itself in ways like anger does. Now, anger, you know when you're angry, all right. When you're sad, you know, tears maybe, or you just feel really flat. Shame, it doesn't work like that, all right. It's kind of a hidden emotion. It masquerades as other things. And so we have to work through how it kind of masquerades as. So we have to work through all the emotions that it's showing up as, you know, belittling others, or being very self-critical, or very competitive even. We see that in narcissism, you know, seeking to control things. These are all ways in which shame is masquerading in your life. And so we need to learn to illuminate. Now, that's such a beautiful word. I wrote a book called life illuminated, because life and light are linked. All right. You thought only plants used light. That's not true. Human beings use light as well. We're embedded in a universe, in our solar system, in fact, from the sun. Light is something that we use in the deepest parts of our cells to produce energy, okay? But you could also see it as a metaphor for shining light into the darkness, right? And illuminating, shining light onto something. It cannot exist when it is finally met and seen. All right, once you know what you're dealing with and someone is able to help you, you get to integrate that experience as over, as in the past, as done, and not about you, but as about the failure of connection. And therefore you can start to metabolize. And I think that's such a beautiful way of looking at it. Like, we have to metabolize food to get the nutrients from it. We have to metabolize our emotions as well, all right, to really work them through and find out what it is we need to learn from this experience. So we have to learn the skill of metabolizing. And we have to do it through dealing with what's in our bodies and what's in our heads. And so that's why sometimes, and most often, in fact, you need help. And there's no shame in asking for help, okay? It was the biggest hurdle for me, was reaching out to someone, because I always believed I should be able to do this myself. And so buried inside flatness, hopelessness, heartbreak, and rage, we often find core shame affecting our ability to feel alive, find meaning, and discover joy in relationship with others. Well, I don't need to comment on that. That's so clear, isn't it? It's just, it's underneath all of that. And we can't find our truth or our meaning until we allow ourselves to deal with what's blocking that truth. While various therapies tend to specialize in one aspect of shame and seek to intervene at that level alone, shame is multidimensional and must be attended to in a way that is full spectrum. Now, that's why I believe the body is the secret here. You know, to try and go at it from your thinking is unidimensional. You know, you're not feeling it. And so we must discover in an experiential way how shame manifests in patterns of habitual thinking, painful, repetitive emotions, somatic contraction, and coagulation. Contraction, right? How do you hold yourself when you're feeling low? You know, you contracted. And coagulation, I love that. Stuckness, right? We think of coagulation as when the blood is sluggish, you know, but all of us can feel like that. And neurobiologically, through dysregulating states of arousal and fight-flight reactivity. Okay, so dysregulation of your nervous system is a real thing, all right? It means your nervous system can't operate properly. I always use my little slinky as a little guide here, a little way of illustrating it. That's a stuck nervous system, all right? Nothing much going on there. This is a highly aroused nervous system, fight and flight. What we want is something that, you know, does this. It needs to come up when you need to be active, and it needs to sort of rest when it's ready to rest, but it needs to have that beautiful movement, that resilience, okay? So shame, oh no, I've gone too far ahead, okay. In this way, shame is not solely a thought, feeling, behavior, or activation of the nervous system, but a unique configuration of all of these. Right, and that's why I think just dealing with thoughts doesn't really work. Maybe just going into yourself and trying to work out your feelings doesn't really work, because you actually need to articulate them. You need to bring all the aspects together. Yes, it's a way of protecting ourselves from an environment that is or was not safe, incapable of holding and mirroring our unique subjectivity, lacking in empathic attunement, and threatening to our psychic survival. I can't tell you how important the idea of safety is. I've gone on and on and on about it, but feeling safe within, all right, is the beginning of therapy. It's the beginning of healing. And you know, if you never learned to feel safe, and currently you're in a situation that doesn't feel safe psychologically, we can't hold ourselves. We don't know who we are. and it doesn't feel safe to be ourselves. And so it's a threat to our psychic survival. And what your body will do in that state is it will shut everything down to the lowest energy state possible. And that's what happened to me. Okay, so your physical symptoms can be really very, very debilitating. And I won't go into why that is as a metabolic reason. I've covered that in previous videos. So shame is not easy to heal, as it is so core and underlies so many of our difficult emotions and limiting self-narratives, what we tell ourselves. But it can be worked with. It must be approached slowly in an embodied way, right? You have to retreat the feelings. You have to be with an empathic, attuned other, usually a therapist, who can hold you while you explore what you're feeling and what that means to you. Where we touch into the associated anxiety in very small doses. That's what I mean by titration. Pushing ourselves just a little, but not outside our window of tolerance. Now, the window of tolerance is a really big thing, okay? Many therapists talk about it as a sort of, well, let's go back to the slinky, okay? So fight and flight, arousal, okay? Freeze, shut down, nothingness. In the middle is your window of tolerance. And some people don't have a very, very broad window of tolerance. They either go into shutdown or flooded with feelings very, very quickly. And so that narrow gap between needs to be expanded so that you can just tolerate a little more threat, or you can just tolerate a little more sadness without shutting everything down, these kind of protective responses. And so we have to work as therapists to increase your window of tolerance and make it easier for you to tolerate your emotions. To flood the shame with presence, warmth, space, and perhaps mostly with a radical sort of kindness. You know, radical kindness, or I talk about it as compassion, but it's similar. If you feel called and it feels safe enough to do so, you can begin to invite in the experience of shame, to meet that lost, frightened, abandoned, unworthy little one who has been carrying this shame for so long, to offer sanctuary for him or her, to listen carefully and with compassion to his or her story, to hold her feelings, to tend to his dysregulating sensations, and to provide a home for the shamed one to rest from a long, ancient, heartbreaking journey. It's welcoming yourself home. That's how you deal with shame. And that's why it's sometimes easier to do that with someone who mirrors welcome, safety, kindness, compassion, who doesn't turn away from you when you tell them your most difficult stories, you know, the things that happened to you that overwhelmed you, the ones that you've told yourself all these years were ridiculous and stupid, and yet they changed you. You know, the time when your teacher humiliated you in front of the class, or you were ousted from your friendship group. I don't know. Those are two things that happened to me. Okay, so little things that happen in childhood that shouldn't affect us, but absolutely do, because they are a wound of being outcast, of being without survival strategies, because without our tribe, biologically, neurobiologically, we are dead. So this is all wired in. We give sanctuary to people who are lost and alone and struggling. And in doing that, we allow themselves to welcome themselves home. You know, we allow them to provide sanctuary within, for the shamed one to rest, you know, and it may be a long, ancient, heartbreaking journey, because it may not be just yours. And one thing that I found in my journey, and I wouldn't say I've completed my journey, I'm still on it, but was that my healing was not just for me, it was for the chain of people before me, my mum, my grandma, all the people that had had difficult experiences, my dad, his brother, because their epigenetic information is within me. I share some of it. And that's the big deal. Okay, your shame may not be just yours. And so I think the healing is the kind of point at which we say, no more, no more. I'm going to carry this no more. I'm going to put that burden down. I'm going to cut that chain that's around me. I'm free. I'm free. If I've gone a bit esoteric on you today, I apologize, but it's sort of encouraged by Matt Liccata's poetic style. So look, healing is a soul journey. It's not a fix-it journey. It's not like, what's the problem? Cut it out. That's modern medicine's approach. It's not ours. And it isn't who human beings are. We are multidimensional, multifactorial. We're just so much more than we're taught. Okay, well, I'll sign off for now. As ever, please let me know what you thought and talk to you soon. All right, bye for now. Bye-bye.